How would you sum up the state of the East Coast gas market in one word?
I think broken is actually a pretty good description.
And in a nutshell, I mean, how did we end up here?
So there are a couple of factors that have contributed to the situation we have now. Look, the first is that the cheap reserves that have been powering Eastern Australia for the last 50 years are gone, effectively. So these are the reserves in offshore Victoria. They're now in decline. But actually the key factor that got us to where we are now was actually the start of the LNG export industry in Queensland. That massively ramped up demand and then introduced the East Coast to international LNG prices, which are volatile and can be quite high at times, and that has then flowed through to the domestic market. One thing in particular though, so 10 years ago Santos started exporting from their Gladstone LNG facility, and really ever since then Santos has effectively been taking gas out of the domestic market to meet their export contracts. So that company effectively made a private decision to build an LNG export facility that was larger than they had reserves for, and we've been paying for it ever since.
Now, the federal government has just completed a major review into the East Coast gas market. What are the options it's examining to rectify this? So
the government is reported to be considering two options. The first is an export licence framework that would apply to the 3 Queensland LNG exporters. What this would mean is that each one of the exporters would need to supply a certain amount of gas into the domestic market as well as export in. The second option is different and would require all domestic producers to supply a certain amount of gas into the domestic market. Where a producer supplies more than they're required to, that would be a surplus amount of supply, and they could potentially then sell that to one of the exporters who would then sell it back into the domestic market to meet their own domestic supply requirement.
So which option, in your opinion, is better?
Look, I think option 1 is undoubtedly better. I think option 2 actually could make things worse.
Option 1 is the one where the individual suppliers have to meet the commitments for themselves.
Yeah. So look, the first thing to know is that the LNG exporters in Queensland control 90% of the gas reserves in Eastern Australia anyway. So a policy that's aimed just at them will account for really most of the reserves. Really that represents bang for buck. That kind of framework's likely to be more simple, and it's likely to lead to additional gas supply very quickly. In contrast, option 2 would be much more complex to design and implement, so it would take longer. Creates a range of risks for smaller gas producers that could then impact on their investment decisions, so it could actually delay new gas coming to market, make things worse.
Okay, so if we go with option 1, under that scenario, if Santos can't meet its export commitments now, where will it get the extra gas to supply the domestic market?
I think there are possibly two options. So one, Santos might purchase gas off one of the other LNG exporters, gas that otherwise would have been exported, and then Santos could sell that into the domestic market. That would be a good outcome because that's gas, again, that would have been exported that is now being supplied domestically. Look, the other option Santos might have is to reduce its LNG exports and then to actually go to the LNG spot market and then buy LNG on the spot market to then meet its long-term export commitments.
For years, the industry was pushing to open up new gas fields such as Narrabri. Is that a solution?
So take a step back, and over the past 10 years on the East Coast, 10 years or so, gas supply has actually boomed, gas production. So it's increased by more than a factor of 300%. But over that period, prices have also tripled. And we've seen a number of large manufacturing closures. So look, I think the short answer is new supply doesn't fix the problem, particularly if that supply is then siphoned by the Queensland LNG exporters and then exported. If we want lower prices, I think an option that requires more supply from LNG exporters is clearly the best option.
Josh Runciman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.